Hello and welcome to this special webinar. My name is Brian Cochran, financial planner here with John Moore and Associates. I'm pleased to be here in our Albuquerque office along with Susan Stewart of Decisions in Care. She's chosen to join us for this excellent presentation on healthcare and planning for future needs, and we're just very excited to be here and to share this content with you today. A little bit about our firm, John Moore and Associates, before we dive into Susan's comments. Our firm's been around about 20 years now. We'll be actually 20 years old in March of 2017. And we have two offices. We have our office on the left that you can see here, just off Indian School Road here in Albuquerque. And we have an office that's been around about 3.5 years now in Scottsdale, Arizona. Very excited to be in that marketplace and growing in the Arizona community. We have 9 members of our team. We have a wonderful team I'm excited to be working with. You can see me down here on the bottom right. We are built into a 3-generation continuity plan. This is the vision of our founder, John Moore, as a way to serve our clients, their children, and their grandchildren through all different phases of life, including what we'll be talking about today, times where they need health care and support around those big decisions. So this team's very diverse in experience and background with well over 100 years of combined experience, and we're always happy to serve clients again here in New Mexico, Arizona, and really around the world. Today's presentation is actually part of a 3-part series that we've put together, and it's inspired by the scripture you see in front of you now. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. This has been an important verse to me. It's a little self-serving as a financial advisor, but really reflects our desire as advisors to go out and find professionals in different areas that have unique expertise and can help assist the families that we serve in certain times of life. The first part of this series was a special session on college planning and choosing a university. That was led by Glenda Durano, who is another expert here in Albuquerque in this area of college planning. Our second presentation was Lighting the Pathways to Healing, which was a special session from Dr. Linda Phelps, French Funerals and Cremations, as well as the Grief Resource Center, which is a new facility that just opened up here in Albuquerque. Dr. Phelps talked about the challenge of dealing with grief and how people can seek support and what the counseling environment looks like during that time of life. Her presentation was absolutely wonderful and will be on our website as a recording. And then, of course, today we're here with Susan Stewart talking about healthcare decisions. So 3 wonderful professional women that chose to spend about 30-40 minutes each contributing to this information. And all 3 of these presentations, as well as our regular quarterly market updates, will be on our website, where you can view them as recordings, but also share them with people who you think might value this wonderful content that we've provided. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan to tell us a little about herself and the background of her company, Decisions in Care, and we'll get to hear what she has to say about today's topic.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.
So just to talk a little bit about my background, I got into this area that I currently work in based on my grandmother. And my grandmother had a stroke. She lived out of state, and as a result of that, I had the opportunity to realize how much I loved working with the elderly, and so I knew from a young age that I wanted to go into this field, and it's the area that I consider my calling, and I really am blessed to be working in this field. So in terms of, I've been a caregiver, I've worked in nursing facilities, I've worked as a director of a home care agency, I have also worked in as an outreach coordinator, but most of my experience has been in the area of care management and guardianship and working as a healthcare power of attorney for individuals. And so I developed Decisions in Care. I founded Decisions in Care in 2001, and it's been really a blessing to have the opportunity to work with the individuals that we get to serve. And we currently have a staff of 5, and the needs just continue to grow out there. So in terms of in America today, by the year 2030, 1 out of 5 people in the United States will be over the age of 65. 50% of those over the age of 85 need support and assistance, and about 40 million Americans provide unpaid family care to someone over the age of 50, which translates into 1 out of every 6 Americans providing care for their loved ones, and that's pretty huge. I had the opportunity to be involved with the Aging and Long-Term Services Department and AARP to develop the New Mexico State Plan for Caregivers. And one of the statistics that they shared as part of that group was there are 419,000 New Mexicans that provide over 274 million hours of unpaid family care. And the average amount of care that's provided by family caregivers each week is 18.4 hours. And if that translates into an actual cost, it would be $3.1 billion annually that family caregivers donate of their time.
Wow. So that's about 20% of the New Mexico population is providing care at some level.
It is. It is.
Incredible.
And the impact of caregiving is huge. Caregivers often take care of another individual at the detriment of their own health. And so we often see caregivers, their physical, their psychological, and their financial well-being is affected negatively for being a caregiver if they don't get the proper support that they really need. So in terms of planning ahead, I think it's critical that we all do as much planning in advance as possible to prevent a crisis situation from occurring. And in terms of planning for an emergency, we can know that there's different situations that could come up. A debilitating injury might be something that we face as individuals in the future. It could be through an automobile accident that has devastating consequences to our health, both either short-term or long-term. And then looking at work-related injuries, sometimes people have accidents on the job that result in a disability. There's a number of different injuries that could come up, but that's just to give you an example. Unexpected illnesses, for instance, somebody could develop cancer, they could have a stroke. This rang true to me recently within the past year. One of my closest friends, she had a scheduled open heart surgery, and during the open heart surgery she suffered a stroke, and so as a result of that had some pretty devastating consequences that we didn't expect, and so we're still in the process of trying to recover from that and making sure that her health improves to the extent that it can. Sometimes having care after rehabilitation is a need. If a person has, for instance, a hip replacement, they're recovering from a stroke, they're going to need to have some rehabilitation, and then likely after rehabilitation they're going to need to have some additional care. So it's not just easily corrected by the rehabilitation alone.
I think one of the key factors here, you mentioned getting hurt at work, or maybe you get in a car accident and you're disabled for a while. A lot of people think, well, I have disability insurance. Well, that may cover the financial end or some of the financial end, but you still need a plan for who's going to do what during that time of care, or when you just simply can't take care of things yourself, right?
Exactly. And if your insurance would pay to some extent, but then looking ahead at the longer term needs that insurance doesn't care for, doesn't cover, that can be problematic as well. And when a person also, as we age, you're more likely to develop cognitive impairments, and so we deal a lot with individuals that are affected by dementia. That could be related to Alzheimer's disease, related to a stroke, related to, sometimes it's not dementia, but traumatic brain injuries, we're seeing those more often. And so the long-term impact and the care needs are huge for individuals.
That's another area I think there's some misconceptions that cognitive issues, even Alzheimer's, are not just left aside for the elderly. You don't have to be 85 to have Alzheimer's. You could be in your 50s, right, and
That's
have early
correct.
onset dementia. And
yeah, that's correct. And unfortunately, I had this ring true not too long ago. Within the past 2 years, actually, I had a friend that was in her 50s, and she developed dementia, and she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, and she passed away as a result of that. Some of the problems surrounding aging vary, and just to give you an idea, a lot of times what we look at is individuals that are aging. Maybe they're not driving the way that they used to. They might start to get lost. Sometimes what we notice with individuals is that there are dings in their car, and unexplained dings in their car. And so wanting to make sure that we're covering all those areas. A person may start to have memory problems. They might be forgetting to do certain things, not following medical recommendations when they go to the doctor. They might be forgetting or minimizing the need for follow-up, which could have a detrimental effect. Sometimes medication management is a big issue. The person might be taking too much medication, taking it sporadically, not taking it when it's scheduled, and so sometimes there's a need for intervention in those aspects. As people age, there's a need for increased assistance a lot of times, and those are with what we call activities of daily living. So they might need more assistance with bathing, dressing, grooming, feeding themselves, going to the bathroom, or ambulation. Additionally, with the instrumental activities of daily living, they might need additional assistance with transportation, with making a list, and keeping track of what they need when they go to the store. Commonly, we see people that, oh, I need more toilet paper, so you get home and they have too much toilet paper. Things of that sort. And so they might need assistance physically as they decline, with housekeeping, with laundry, with meal preparation. A lot of times the appetite is diminished, particularly if people live at home alone, and so they're going to need encouragement to eat. Maybe they don't feel like making a full meal like they used to when they had a family at home. And so a lot of times if there are other people around, that's going to be beneficial, and then maybe having meals be prepared through somebody is a need as well. There could be a need for increased supervision, particularly if there are cognitive impairments, or if the person is at risk for falling related to their health conditions. They might be letting strangers in. They might be, they might need more reminders. And some of the things that we look for when we go into people's homes and assess for their needs, if they're cooking or if they're forgetting to leave the burner turned on, and so there might be burned pots and pans. Are they remembering to clean out their refrigerator and throw away food that might make them sick? And then financial management. Sometimes as people age, if they're lonely, they are more at risk for scams, for letting people into their home, for answering phone calls, and unfortunately we see that happen all too often. There are some international scams that people get involved in as well that are real devastating. They might be forgetting to pay their bills or paying the bills a number of times. They might be giving their money away to somebody that they think needs the money. So it might mean getting the trust officer involved if there's a trust officer, maybe alerting the person that's been named as the financial power of attorney when those situations arise.
One thing we often see, you mentioned this, is there's not as much money in the bank account, and they can't remember why, and you look back and they've been writing very large checks. It might be to charities. It's not always a scam. It's to
Right.
legitimate charities they've always supported.
Right.
But now all of a sudden, for no real reason, they're writing $10, $20, $30, $40,000 checks, whereas before they were giving a few $100s a month.
Exactly.
And of course, the charities are just accepting that generosity.
Right.
They don't know that there's something going on that's wrong. And that's one of the first signs we've usually seen of people. And again, they may not remember the gifts. I remember one gentleman who couldn't make his ends meet month to month, and we looked down, and he had committed to small deposits to various charities at $25 to $50 a month, where they were automatically withdrawing from his bank account. But when you added them all up, he was giving away about 40% of his income.
Right.
Which for some people that's great, and they can afford that type of generosity. In his case, it's significantly impacting his lifestyle. But they just kind of added up over time. So it was all these little 25 and 50s added up to be thousands of dollars a month. So it's like you said, it's that kind of loss of real control and grasp of what's
Right.
going on financially.
Sometimes I also see, as a person develops dementia, they will get amounts mixed up. So instead of giving $100, they're writing a check for $1,000 or something like that. And so it's important to, keep an eye on that. So some of the tools that are important in terms of pre-planning for healthcare would involve having a financial power of attorney. That would be important to have in place to avoid court proceedings down the line, because if a person gets to the point where they're not able to make their own decisions as far as who they would want to make decisions for them if they're unable to do so, too often the court has to get involved, and that can be very expensive. A financial power of attorney would be important to be the party to sign for contracts on the person's behalf. If there are healthcare needs that arise that they need to sign for going into a care facility, signing for home care, that type of thing. And then an advanced healthcare directive is important to have. That's also referred to as a healthcare power of attorney. And so there are a number of different ways that this can be developed. There is a durable power of attorney, which would mean that a person is naming somebody to make their decisions for them now, and that it would remain in effect in the future if they became incapacitated. And so that would be considered a durable power of attorney. A springing power of attorney, on the other hand, would generally, it requires there to be letters from two healthcare providers indicating that the person is incapacitated before the party could step in to make decisions. One of the questions that I'm faced with a lot of times is people saying, well, why would I want to name somebody to make decisions for me now? I don't want them to make decisions for me now, but just in the future. And so I think it's important to really consider, if you are uncomfortable naming somebody to be able to make decisions now, do you trust them if you become incapacitated? So it's really important to be thoughtful about who you name to be that decision maker.
How do you sort of decide on that? So a lot of people we work with, the just default is the spouse, obviously, if they're married, and then it goes on to the children, but that's sort of an assumption about the children that they have the interest, the knowledge, the capacity to make that decision. And when I see someone who maybe lives here in Albuquerque but has children in, let's say, South Carolina and Vermont and Florida, those people aren't here, so it makes it hard. So is it better to have someone local that's a non-family member? When do they seek out maybe a professional like yourself to be on that power of attorney? How do people decide that?
Yeah, I think those are all really good questions. I think it can be the most beneficial to have somebody local, certainly, because that party would be able to go with the person to the doctor if the need for that came up in the future and the person wasn't able to fully comprehend and make sure follow-up occurs after a medical appointment. Also, through my company, we get a number of individuals that have family members, but they don't want them to make decisions for them. Or on the flip side, they don't want to burden them to make those decisions. And so depending on the needs, there there are assistance available through outside agencies as well. And so a person might be named as the healthcare or financial power of attorney and live out of state, and they can always contract with local organizations to kind of be their eyes and ears and to be able to give them feedback about what the needs are and what's going on. And then there's a valuable form here in New Mexico. It was developed. It's called the Values History Form, and it's meant to be a tool, basically, for an individual to express their specific wishes, and it has a lot of different areas. It talks about who are the people that are the most important to you, how important is it for you to stay at home, even if it means spending more money to stay at home, what would be important to you towards the end of your life, how important are your religious beliefs, do you want somebody to come to visit you if you are dying, and who should those parties be. And so it's meant to be a tool that an individual can fill out and give to their surrogate decision makers so that they have all the information to the extent possible to step into that individual's shoes and make decisions based on their values and how they have made their wishes known. And so it can be very beneficial for an individual that wants to remain in control even after they're no longer able to make their own decisions.
And one thing we encourage people to think about is these legal documents of financial and medical powers of attorney. You know, it's good to have that also on your adult children. So if you have someone who's going off to college who's 18, or maybe they're 23, 24 years old, still live near home and aren't quite fully on their own financially, and I mean, who's going to make a medical decision if they are in a car accident or have some kind of health episode?
Right.
It's good to have that on your own children, which sort of people think of it the other way around. The children always take care of the parent, but in this culture today, we have a lot of people in their mid-20s to early 30s. So the parents are still really that primary source of support if needed. And so it's good to have that going through the generations.
I think it is important. And I've actually had I do also assessments through the court system in some situations, and we've had some of these situations where it's been individuals in their 20s that have had a tragic accident, and the parents had to go through the court system to be appointed to make medical decisions on their behalf, and that can be a very costly process too.
It's just not where you want to be spending your time
in
that type of emergency situation.
No. So in looking at the future care needs, the levels of care, and I go with non-medical home care first because that's considered generally where people start if they're needing just a little bit more support at home. They're needing somebody maybe to drive them to doctor's appointments that are on the other side of town where they're not comfortable driving, or they're needing housekeeping to be done. They're needing a little bit more assistance with preparing their meals. And so usually that's where we start, with having some increased home care. And that's also referred to as custodial care, so it's non-medical. So it's not paid for by Medicare or by insurance. And I still run into a number of people that think that this type of care is paid for through insurance or through Medicare, and that's just simply not the case. Non-medical home care is paid for generally privately. Sometimes long-term care insurance will cover it, or there are some Medicaid-funded programs that will provide that level of support, but usually there's a waiting list for those Medicaid services. So the person that needs increased assistance, if they're needing that level of care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to have a caregiver in their home if it's paid for through an agency, the average cost for that level of care is about $20,000 per month, which is huge. There is a type of service called live-in care, and that can be care at a reduced rate if the person is able to stay in the person's home for a longer period of time. But there have been some recent changes with the labor law where caregivers have to be paid overtime, and so we're waiting to see how all of this is going to work itself out. I think we're a little early in to be able to know, but the bottom line is the cost of non-medical home care can be very expensive. The next option would be assisted living facility, and so that looks differently depending on the individual and depending on their needs. It could be a house in a residential community where there's a caregiver through an organization that provides 24-hour supervision. They cook all the meals, they provide medications, they assist with personal care. And then there's other individuals that really want to feel like they're in their own home. And so there are assisted living facilities that are larger where the individual can stay in an apartment, they can come down for meals, and they can receive some of the additional supports. There's also secure dementia facilities if people can afford to pay privately for those, and those are licensed also as assisted living facilities. So the cost for long-term nursing care, and that's what we referred to in the past as nursing homes, it runs about $7,500 a month, and you would be sharing a room with another person because there aren't many private pay rooms, at least in New Mexico, that are available. I think we're going to see that changing hopefully in the future, but that's currently the state of how things are. And it's important to note that if a person is not able to pay privately for this level of care, that the number of Medicaid beds are very few. And so it's hard to get into a facility, and if you don't have any money at all, and if you're going to try to get in Medicaid pending, at least here in New Mexico, there aren't many facilities that are able to accept an individual, and it may not be the facility that you would have selected if you could pay for it privately. Then there's skilled nursing care, and skilled nursing care is something that a person is eligible for if they meet the Medicare requirements usually it's after a 3-day hospital stay, and it's short-term in duration. So generally it's for physical therapy after a hip replacement, maybe the person is needing intense antibiotics and needing the services of a nurse. They have some kind of wound care that needs to be provided by a registered nurse. And so Medicare is real specific on how long they will cover that, and so that would be for skilled care. Rehabilitation would be a rehabilitation facility, and that's more intense. Generally, you get more rehabilitation up to 4 hours a day. And again, it's for short-term care, and so it's not uncommon for the person to need more care after they're discharged. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how this type of care is all paid for. Private pay is generally how it starts when people's needs are more minimal. And the cost can be great depending on what the needs are. For long-term care insurance, that's a good option for people to have there's a lot of options that are available now. And of course, the younger you are when you start paying for the long-term care insurance, the less expensive per month it's going to be. And as a person ages and or becomes disabled, it may not be financially feasible to apply for long-term care insurance at a certain point.
We generally coach people that they're going to buy long-term care insurance, try to do it before you're age 60, ideally somewhere around 55, just for that affordability and the pre-planning. And also, you just don't know what factors might come up as you get older. If you say, oh, I'll buy in 5 years, well, you can easily have some type of a health care situation that disqualifies you based on the underwriting standards of the insurance companies.
Definitely. And then Medicare does pay for what we talked about as skilled nursing care or some of the rehabilitation care. It also pays for some types of home care after a person has been in the hospital, or depending on changes in your physical needs. So for instance, if your doctor orders physical therapy in the home, that can be paid for through Medicare. But again, it's short-term in duration. Medicaid services, Medicaid has some services that they will pay for. For institutional care, a person has to be eligible both medically and financially, and the programs vary from state to state, whereas Medicare is a federally funded program, but Medicaid is a state-funded program. And the person here in New Mexico, there's certain criteria that they have to meet. They can own their own house, they can own their own car, own a burial account, and have $2,000 in assets to be financially eligible. But then you also need to have medical eligibility if you're going to qualify for institutional care, and that means that you would need to require assistance with 2 or more of your activities of daily living.
What are some of the examples of activities of daily living? Is it feeding yourself, transportation?
Right.
What else fits into those 7 categories?
It would involve dressing yourself, and a lot of the criteria depends on how well the person that's doing the assessment spells out the particular needs. It could be that the individual is able to dress themselves, but maybe they're layering their clothes. You know, they have 4 layers of clothing on and it's 100 degrees outside.
Interesting. Okay.
So you have to look beyond the actual ability, but look at you know, the type of assistance and supervision that's needed. Basically with bathing, dressing, grooming, are they brushing their teeth? Are they taking their dentures out to brush them? Ambulation, if the person is needing assistance with transferring in and out of bed, in and out of a wheelchair, that could be something that could be beneficial as well. And then toileting, if they're needing assistance with toileting as well. So those are some of the areas. And then also there are programs that are available for individuals to receive care paid for by Medicaid in assisted living facilities or in their home, but there's a process and there's a waiting period for some individuals. It gets more complex. And then of course the Veterans Administration has some programs that, for instance, the aid and attendant program, where people can get some support for services to be provided. So in terms of resources that are available, we've talked about non-medical home care. Sometimes meal delivery services can be beneficial. Maybe Meals on Wheels, or here in Albuquerque, there's the Department of Senior Affairs that provides meal services. For other individuals that want more gourmet type of meals, there are chef services. So there are chefs that will prepare meals, that will package them, and they can put them into containers to be frozen so that the person can eat them as they're able to. And then there are meal sites that are available as well, like through the Department of Senior Affairs. The reason I bring that up is that it's helpful for individuals as we age. One of the big problems that can lead to further health issues is isolation. So it's so important that a person be given the opportunity to participate with others in areas of interest, and then also for making sure that they are eating with other people, because sometimes we see weight loss, we see loss of appetite, and it's that they either forget to eat or it's no fun if you're eating by yourself. Transportation, that's an area that seems to be of the greatest need, at least here in Albuquerque. And services are really lacking. The insurance can be very expensive for these providers, and so that's part of the dilemma. But there are some transportation services that are available, but I think we really have a need for increased services. There's adult day services that are available for individuals that maybe they live with a loved one and they're able to, they're able to continue to live there, but when the person works, maybe they're not as safe at home. And so instead of home care, they might go to an adult day program where they can be involved with activities of interest, they can be around other people, they can get a hot meal at that particular service. And then, of course, care in a facility. That can be through assisted living or nursing facilities. So in terms of care managers, when I'm talking about a care manager, I'm talking about a person that's their loyalty is to the individual themselves, and they're not employed through one of the service organizations, because there are people that call themselves care managers that are with home care agencies, with some of the care facilities, and that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a care manager here. I'm talking about an independent care management agency that would be able to focus on the individual, to identify what the needs are, and to coordinate services based on that person's wishes, and we tend to go with the least restrictive intervention. So keeping a person at home for as long as possible. We look at legal issues, making sure that the person has advanced planning in place, making sure that they have the power of attorney documents, that they have a will or a trust. And again, we're not going to be making those decisions. We would be referring them to an estate planning attorney or somebody that could further assess and assist them. And the goal there would be to prevent a crisis from happening. Looking at the financial position, how long realistically at the current rate of spending is the money going to continue to last based on the person's needs? And if the needs are growing, looking at, okay, do we need to apply for other types of services? What are some other options, and at what point should we look at making a transition? We help look at the health issues, making sure that a person's needs are being met, and identifying gaps in services so that we can make sure that the person is functioning as well for as long as possible and having the best quality of life. We would be able to identify the support that's needed for a person functionally, and are they somewhat confused because they might need to have further cognitive testing that might be able to be treatable and or reversible. Looking at a person's living situation, is it safe? Is it working? What additional supports might they benefit from? And then we work with families in terms of looking at sorting out options based on the particular situation. We could look at a person's sometimes there's family dynamics that are involved where there's different opinions about what should happen with mom or dad, and we can help have an open discussion and act as a facilitator so that we're able to just have an open discussion and come up with possible solutions. And then I'm a member of the Aging Life Care Association. That can be a valuable resource nationally for individuals. And basically a care manager, we've talked about, we can help with family conflict, we can help with crisis situations, we can help educate people on what the needs are. Sometimes having an objective eye can be beneficial to look at what the actual needs are and what the options are. Looking at advocacy that might be needed in a particular healthcare system, or if the care is not quality care that's being provided in a facility, we can help with knowing how to navigate through that. And if the person themselves is refusing help, we can look at what kind of intervention is needed. And so you can always look up Aging Life Care Association.
So if someone's looking for a person of your expertise, they can go to that website, Aging Life Care, and find somebody in Philadelphia where their mom is, or
Yeah.
help out a family member in another state, and find a qualified person who can assist with that process.
Yes, it has on the website, it has an area where you can enter the zip code or the city and state and find professionals that have certain credentials in that particular area.
And do you feel there's value in having someone local like that? I think if someone maybe has a family member here in Albuquerque, you're going to be more aware of what are the providers here for home care, or
Yeah.
what facilities meet the needs of someone with cognitive issues that needs Alzheimer's support. So having that local person can make a difference.
It can make a difference. I think it's also important to interview the provider that you're considering going with, to find out how they operate, to make sure you understand what the costs are, to make sure that you understand how flexible they are, because some organizations will let you use them on an as-needed basis. Others want you to continue to use them on a monthly basis. So really it's just good to make sure you ask questions.
Yeah, and maybe even if you don't have a healthcare situation now, if you have an aging parent or a sibling that has some type of a health issue that's going to get worse over the years, and you already know that, knowing somebody like yourself in their community, so you know who you're going to call when the emergency comes, should it come.
Yeah.
You're not digging through the phone book, scrambling,
Exactly.
and in a panic and an emotional time.
Yeah,
So.
and it's always good, to the extent possible, to pre-plan, make sure that you go to different seminars as they're applicable, and gathering the information so that you'll have your file ready, so that you can know what support that you don't have, so that you know what you would need from an aging life care professional, for instance.
That's great. Well, Susan, thank you so much. This is a lot of great information.
You're welcome.
And again, for those of you listening live right now, we encourage you to jump on the website if you want to listen back and hear some of this again and go back through your notes. We'll leave Susan's information up here if you need to give her a phone call or shoot her an email with specific questions, or if you need her support today. I definitely encourage you to reach out to her at Decisions in Care. And thank you again, Susan. This has been great. And
Thanks for having me.
I think this information will be a blessing to a lot of people.
Good.
So with that, we will sign off, and we look forward to having you on for another seminar in the future.
Thank you.